Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for coming. And sorry to interrupt. Just want to give a brief account. Moctar Yedaly is a telecom, satellite, and computer engineering with an MBA in international business. He graduated from George Washington University, Amity University, and Institute of Informatics. He has more than 20 years of international experience in the field of communication and networks management, resource evaluation, and policy preparation. Moctar is a former staff of Intelsat in the USA and RASCOM in Cote d'Ivoire. Since 2008, he is in charge of Information Society within the Department of Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union Commission, an intergovernmental organization with headquarters in Addis Ababa. In his capacity, has contributed to and managed many projects and conferences around the world, including Program for Infrastructure Development for Africa, PIDA, .Africa domain name, and African Internet Exchange System. Moctar is fluent in English, French, Arabic, Russian, and Wolof. Okay, so you have the floor, Moctar. I wish I had spoken Swahili, but anyway, Jambo. Habari yako. Without further ado, I will just hand it over right away to our first panelist, Towela. Please, thank you.
Good afternoon. Okay, so in typical un-IGF fashion, I have slides, but I only have 5 slides. So bear with me because I think the slides are important just so that you can get a better sense of what I will be speaking to. So this is the session on the Africa IGF, the way forward. And I think that if we are going to be talking about the way forward, the focus is on how we can improve. And in order to improve, we need to take stock of where we're coming from and where we're at right now. And that should then inform where we're going. So the slides that I'm about to share with you and the thoughts and the views that I'm about to share with you, these are my thoughts and my views, are based on research that I did as part of a master's in contemporary diplomacy, focusing on internet governance. And I chose to study the regional IGFs, including the Africa IGF, looking at how they are structured and how that structuring impacts on their effectiveness. So it was a question of trying to understand how we're working, how effective are we, how can we actually even measure our effectiveness, and what do we then need to do to improve. So I'm not sharing all the results, but just sharing a few that I think might be useful for framing this discussion. So in terms of the approach, is this visible? Yes. Okay, for those, this way it is. For the ones there, not so much. But it was just a question of saying, in terms of looking at the effectiveness, I looked at 3 parameters for all the regional IGFs and the Africa IGF. I looked at what I considered to be the architectural elements, which look at how the dialogue or the forum was designed and established. I then looked at the procedural aspects. How is the forum run? And then the operational issues. How is it maintained and how is it sustained? And within those 3 broad categories, I looked at different attributes. So in terms of the architecture, things to do with the purpose, the objectives, who is convening, who is coordinating, who are the stakeholders, what is the stakeholder buy-in, what's the geographic scope, and how institutionalized is the process. Procedurally, we looked at stakeholder involvement, the meeting spaces, the agenda setting, agenda content, the preparatory processes and the timeline, and the nature of discussions. And then lastly, in terms of the operational aspects, it was looking at communication, looking at the secretariat, looking at funding, and then looking at linkages between the forum and other fora and other spaces as well. So one result that I would like to share, which I think is very relevant for this gathering, and I think it has come up quite a bit, was to look at the perceived dominance of stakeholder groups. So the question was posed to the respondents to say, for each of these IGFs, national, regional, continental, and global, who do they perceive as being more dominant in that space? And you will notice that civil society came out very strongly as being dominant in the continental, which is the Africa IGF where we are today. And I think that conversation has also come up in quite a number of the sessions. So another thing to note there is the absence of the media, absence or notable lack of visibility of academia and the private sector, as well as the technical communities. So these are things that we need to think about as we are looking at how we build and structure our IGF going forward. How are we going to address some of these deficiencies? In terms of linkages, the research looked at what people perceived in terms of what was actually happening as far as linking their forums to other spaces and what they felt was the most effective way of linking their forum to other spaces. And so this is a ranking of the top 5. In terms of what they perceived was actually happening on the ground, they looked at issues they considered that members in their organizing committees participating in other spaces was number 1. Reports and outcomes from their forum being sent to other spaces, speakers being invited to their forum from other spaces, and then issues being identified to guide their conversations coming from other spaces, and lastly, the dissemination of information on upcoming events. So that's what's actually happening. What they felt would be most effective didn't deviate too much from what was actually happening, except when you look at the issue of speakers being invited to their own forum, people felt that that would be a more effective way of linking. And then also in terms of the topical issues being identified from other spaces and forums having a higher ranking. And then pre-events were also rated highly as a means of linking their forum to other spaces. So for instance, going and organizing a pre-event at the IGF or at some other space would be an effective way of linking your forum to other spaces. Issues and follow through. So what this was looking at, what I did was I looked at all the reports and all the agendas from the beginning of West Africa IGF until where we are today, and looked at the topics, the sub-themes, the recommendations, and how they are captured, and so on and so forth. Now, you'll note that to date, 2013 is the only year that we have had all 4 regional IGFs and the Africa IGF. The North Africa IGF did not feature very much in my study because there wasn't very much documentation about the North Africa IGF. So this basically is meant to show the fact that we have sub-themes, and then the sub-themes basically lead us into talking about recommendations and things that need to be followed through. And alarmingly, with the Africa IGF, I counted close to 50 recommendations from the 2013 forum. And then West Africa IGF, plus or minus about 33 or so. So what this is telling us is that we need to think through in terms of the recommendations, because obviously the recommendations are things that we need to act upon in some measure or in some way. And if we have 50 recommendations, how are we going to act on all those 50 recommendations? So it speaks to a need to prioritize. Yes, there are many things that we should be doing or could be doing, but we need to pick the ones that are most important or most urgent or most doable in the immediate time frames that we have. So in terms of addressing structural challenges, these are some of my recommendations. So the things in the white boxes, those are what I was looking at in terms of assessing the structural aspects of the different forums. So in terms of the objectives, there's a need to define very clearly what the objectives are for policy shaping. And I'm being very specific about talking about policy shaping. Every forum has objectives. If you look at every forum, every regional forum, Africa IGF, we have the TORs, we have objectives that are very clear. But I think we also then need to go a step further and talk about what are our objectives as far as policy shaping. And why I say that is because it comes back to this whole conversation we keep having about what is the purpose, what is the use, why are we doing this? Then the convening, again, you need to be clear about who is convening, name the convener. Sometimes you look at these different forums, you're not clear who the convener is. You're not clear who the secretariat is. You're not clear who the organizing committee is. We need to be very clear and transparent about this. The stakeholder buy-in, again, we need to be very deliberate in identifying the regional actors for all the different stakeholder groups and making sure that they are aware of what we're doing and that they have a chance to participate. The preparatory processes need to have mechanisms to engage stakeholders ahead of the meetings. And we need to also think about how can we establish a consultation mechanism among the regional IGFs? Because right now, there isn't a very structured way that we actually coordinate amongst ourselves at that regional level in terms of getting all the regionals to talk and come up maybe even with the agenda and so on and so forth. We only talk when we come here to the Africa IGF, and I think we need to be talking even in between meetings. Hosting, we need to have transparent and more predictable hosting arrangements. I think when the presentation was being made about SAIGF, we heard that in 2012, we could not have an SAIGF because hosting was a challenge. So we need to be clear about what does it entail to host? How do we identify a host? And what does it mean when a country offers to host and so on and so forth? The agenda setting and content, we need to have a streamlined process for how we identify themes and sub-themes. The meeting format, we need to be, as far as possible, adopt open and inclusive meeting spaces and have some transparency in how we define the sessions and pre-events. Everybody needs to know what's going on. You don't want to be constantly asking, where's the agenda? Where's the call? Who is doing this? Who is doing what? It needs to be very clear and transparent. The secretariat needs to be clearly identified and needs to function as a centralized coordination point. And then there needs to be transparency also in the funding in terms of how we're mobilizing resources and how we're expending those resources. And then we need to be very clear and deliberate about how we establish links with the key actors at the regional level, including the regional economic communities and the AF Star organizations. In terms of addressing effectiveness, again, there were several parameters that I looked at in terms of trying to come to some commonality in analyzing the different regional IGFs. So the charter and the mandate. Some regional IGFs have some kind of a founding document, others do not. And without that, you lose institutional memory because as you go over time, there's nothing that we can go back and reference and say, this is where it started, this is what we said. The Africa IGF has TORs, which is very good, and that's our founding document. And we need to be able to be aware of that, and we need to be able to reference that from time to time. Participation. It was very difficult to get statistics about participation. Some regional IGFs, like the West Africa IGF, I think is very good about keeping statistics. But with the other IGFs, it was very, very difficult to get statistics on participation. You would either sometimes just get the total number of participants, you wouldn't know how many were from each stakeholder grouping, you would not get a gender disaggregation, you would not get an age disaggregation or even a geographic disaggregation, which makes it very difficult for us to track over time what's changing and what's not changing. In terms of meeting records, again, very difficult because for the most part, across all the different IGFs, there isn't a standard way of reporting. The reports are not readily available, and then there isn't also a deliberate process in terms of archiving. And for the Africa IGF, I think that work has started in that direction, and we just need to make sure that we actually do continue in that way. The outcome documents, I think that there's a clear need to distinguish between reports that talk about the details of the meeting and then the outcomes, the synthesis of the outcomes. So whether it's a communique or a media statement or whatever it is, there has to be a distinction between the two. They're both equally valuable, but they serve different purposes. And I think we need to be clear about that. And then we also need to find a way of distilling key messages that are aimed at specific stakeholder groups, because not everything that has happened in here is relevant to everybody. So we need to be very clear about what messages do we want to aim at our policymakers, what messages do we want to aim at our regulators, private sector, civil society, technical, academia, and so on and so forth. The press and media, I think we need to also be very deliberate in terms of having media advisories and press releases as part of our working methods. We also need to look at having briefing documents. When I come into the Africa IGF, I should know and have some substantive background material that's going to inform me about the kinds of discussions we're going to have, the issues that are on the table, and how can I then contribute to those discussions. And then the prioritization and following up on issues. I did say that we have a lot of recommendations. We need to limit the number of things that we identify as priorities for following up. And then we need to also designate people to actually take those on. Because if we make recommendations and we don't assign or task anybody to follow up on them, this is why we come back the next year and we're saying the same things we said last year and nothing has changed because nobody was tasked to follow it up. And then we need to incorporate those priority issues in our intersessional work. So in between meetings, we should be working on these things that we've identified here as challenges and finding ways to address them. So when next time we come for the Africa IGF, we can say, last year we talked about this, it was an issue, this is what we've done about it. The last aspect of effectiveness is the impact. We need to have some kind of feedback and self-evaluation in terms of how we're working. How well are we doing? Can we self-evaluate and check ourselves so we make sure that the next time around we do not make the same mistakes? I think we also need to maintain a watch list of policy issues because we talk a lot about things that governments need to do, things that need to be done, but we don't have a way of following up and saying, we talked about this as needing policy attention. What has happened? What has not happened? Which country has taken steps that are addressing this? And how can other countries learn from that? And then we need to collect and document best practices and success stories on the issues that we table during our meetings and our discussions, so those can be used to inform other people and to encourage them in terms of the work ahead. And that is it. Thank you very much.
As very informative and brilliant. Our next presenter will be Mr. Tijani, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pardon me, I will speak French.
My colleague hasn't left anything for me to address. She has said everything, but let me go on and develop further what she has said. I think that the study she made was rather exhaustive, and all that I wanted to say was said by Towela. I will insist on certain ideas regarding IGF Africa. Even the sessions which I attended were really successful. They were successful in the sense that we managed to bring together all the stakeholders. Towela said that there were problems, but then there were all the representatives of all the various stakeholders. We treated subjects which were really current concerning internet governance, and we went on to organize the African IGF every year. So for me, this is a real success. And let me thank all those who contributed to the various IGFs from the beginning up to the last one, which was held in Addis Ababa. In Tunisia, when they train, a lot of the time it's not an event, it's normal, but when it comes late, we talk about it, because we want to know why it has come late, and in the future want to see how it can come in time. And that's why I'm not going to talk about positive things which were being done up to here. But let me talk about some limitations so that we can avoid them in the future. One of the subjects that Towela has talked about was clarity. The problem of IGF Africa is that the secretariat was sometimes it was here, sometimes there, and it's not clear. You cannot communicate with the secretariat. And why? It's because they are sort of volunteers and they don't have a lot of means to put in so that they can really be they can be available for the forum. They're only available during the period of preparation, final preparation for the forum. The Abuja experience was good in a certain way. There was a participation of the community in the preparation of the program, and even the structure and the format of IGF Africa. This year, unfortunately, wasn't the case. There wasn't a lot of participation from the community. I'm not going to try to find the reasons for that, and we have to avoid this. In my opinion, we should not confuse the role of the Secretariat with the role of what we call MAG generally, who are in charge of preparing the program and to choose the themes and also to find the panelists. The Secretariat is there to help, just to help on that. In the future, one of the recommendations we'll give is to have a difference between the Secretariat and preparation of the program and its content, generally speaking. This is to say that it doesn't mean that the Secretariat does not take part just as a party. So we should have the community and handling what happens at global level. The issue of the host country was also a problem, specifically for the Abuja IGF. The people were not happy because there were some candidates who were not considered. The choice was done by a single person and so on. So the process of choice of the host country has to be transparent. And normally it is Secretariat which calls candidates early enough, and it has to be transparent. Everyone has to be informed. And then following the applications, the choice would be done in a transparent manner. This is an important thing so that there is no frustration and we always have candidates. Because sometimes you find that if someone applies and then they were not picked and then they find that the one taken is the one who's new, it brings some frustration. Also, funding is a problem. There should be a transparent system for funding. Everybody should know what is happening and how things are done. Also, we have a website, but we have a tendency of wanting to create a website for each IGF Africa. We refuse that for Abuja. We say that we already have a website which we can use. And finally, I think this year the same website was used. That's a good thing. The way it is, it does not respond to the demands, requirements of IGF Africa. This is internet governance, and we don't have a website which is updated. Not only at the moment of the forum, only it always has to be updated. So it has to be easy. Registration has to be easy. So some problem be here and there. In the website is a key element in the preparation of the IGF. Reporting, we have two things. We have the outcome of the IGF and also the reports. I think that we have a chance of moving in position to have results of the IGF because internationally, up to now, this is not allowed. the results, you can have ideas which were put forward, but you cannot have recommendation and you cannot have something formal. We have a chance now that it is possible for our IGF, and this is important. Africa, we have specific problems and we should have recommendation, and recommendation should be in the right place, that is placed before governments, but even civil society, the private sector, and all the various stakeholders. Reports. The reporting, the interest of this website is to have all the reports and they can be accessed there. If we have a nice website, it is possible to have a visible website that can be accessible to everybody. I'll end there on the dialogue and then give the chance to others to continue. Thank you.
Merci Tijani pour toutes les.
Thank you, Tijani, for all the contributions you have made. They were perfect.
Is there any questions to them or to the Secretariat from the floor? I see Mary here. I see Senegal. Gabon. Unica. Jamila, all right. Okay, thanks. Mary.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panelists for the pertinent issues they've raised. First, I will say that we are moving forward. We have succeeded. This is our fourth one. It wouldn't have been, it will grow and get stabilized. And is a teaching period where we'll learn as we go. The second IGF in Kenya, at the time of the when we held the IGF in Kenya, we saw our lapses. We tried to see what we could do, and then unfortunately, that of Abuja, it was the time we had difficulties with security in Abuja, but at least we were able to go forward. Just like Tijani said, we are learning by the way. I think one other thing I want to raise is where the regional will key into the African IGF. Whom will the regional coordinators speak to when they are to talk about the IGF processes? I know at regional level, the states will talk to the regional, the sub-regional coordinators. So who coordinates? We need to clear that. We'll define, do we want MAG or Bureau or whatever we want to do, multi-stakeholder, we define that. And we know that in our own region, the government still plays a lot of role. The civil society, I don't know whether they are up here, just like to the result of what she did. We don't see much of the academia. We didn't see, the press was absent completely. So probably our communication, there's still problem with our communication. We look at that. And if we have a secretariat, let's know where the secretariat is. It's not today is with ECA, tomorrow is with AUC. The next day it comes back to ECA, the next year it goes to AUC. I think stability is very, very key, it's important. We'll know whom we'll contact, we'll know the handle, we know whom to communicate. If we want to ask questions, we know whom we ask questions. At least one of the things we raised in Kenya was the standalone website, and which I think is getting better. So others have raised the issue. So I needed to raise the issue of relationship. Whom will the coordinators at the regional level relate with or contact or collaborate or partner with? And then those that are absent in our region, the stakeholders that are not in, how do we bring them in? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Senegal, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. My question is for Madam Towela, who had the time to conduct a study on the regional IGFs. There are issues that were discussed by the STC of the African Union. The issue was communication and ICT. According to your study, what role do the states play in the different regional IGFs? Do they have a major role in the existing IGFs? According to your study, what role should be played by the states in the various regional IGFs? Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. I also wanted to join previous speakers in saying that there have been a lot of changes and developments. There are success stories that we hear every year. And I also wanted to propose that in order to facilitate the discussions, that the preparations are undertaken on time. And I'd like to express the hope that on the website, you include the presentations of the panelists in advance so that we can prepare as the participants and thus reduce the amount of time allocated to discussions. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
No, please.
Thank you very much to the presenters. I just had one point. I think we need to focus on the solutions. We know what the challenges are. Last year, Moctar led a similar session, and there were many recommendations that came up. But I think we need to firm up on follow up. We'll bring good recommendations today, but what happens from tomorrow? I think this is what we need. If we can have a practical approach to it, and just if we can know what to expect in terms of implementation of all these very good recommendations, because we know the challenges, but what are the solutions? Thank you.
Unica, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think, as some have emphasized, there has been some progress in comparison to the first IGF, but not everything has been good. It's an ongoing process, and every year we're learning in order to improve things. So we need to think about the regional IGFs, in my opinion. These regional IPFs need to operate well. And they need to contribute towards the regional IGFs, because at regional level, we have East African IGFs and West African IGFs that are providing positive results because the government is involved, and the government's involvement is very important. So we need to think about this and see how we can proceed with these sub-regional IGFs so that the governments are more involved. And when we have Africa IGF, there'll be more participation. And I believe that in advance, people need to be informed on the topics we are going to discuss during the IGFs. We need to have background papers. I think this is something we need to think about. And we need to have sites that have resources at secretariat level, and this will help with monitoring. And we need monitoring because, as was said by one of the speakers, there were a lot of recommendations, but since there was no follow-up, then you don't know what has been achieved. So the IGF makes a lot of recommendations, but you find that we're repeating the same things every year. So at secretariat level, we need to have monitoring mechanisms, and we need to see what mechanisms can be put in place. So I think we need as many ideas as possible so that our work can improve, especially in the secretariat, so that the secretariat can serve the African community effectively. Thank you.
Okay, since we don't have much time, I will just go straight to, there was one question to Towela from Senegal, and we'll have to answer to that question, and then we'll start doing some sort of wrap up quickly.
Do I have a question?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for that question, which was asking about the extent to which governments are involved in the regional IGFs. So what I found was that it really depended largely on how the regional IGFs were established. When you look at SADC, the SADC Southern Africa IGF from the very beginning was established through a ministerial decision. So it was actually taken to the ministers to actually endorse and approve and support the establishment of SAIGF. And so all the outcomes that come out of SAIGF are reported to the ministers. West Africa IGF, I think at inception that was not the case, but recently ECOWAS has come on board to support the West Africa IGF, and we believe that through that is how governments will be engaged. The East Africa IGF has always had a strong relationship with government. Government has always been involved, although I don't know that there is a formal process in terms of how they interact with government. But I think what should be noted is that from the perspective of Africa IGF and the AUC, there's been a very deliberate effort to actually get the regional economic communities on board with the process of internet governance and with the regional IGFs, and get them to support the regional IGFs. Hence, what we've seen this year with ECOWAS coming on board to support the West Africa IGF, and we believe that we will see that soon in the other regions as well. Thank you.
Okay, I will try with the Secretariat to go through some sort of wrap-up. First of all, I would like to thank the both presenters. I think Towela did a very good studies and overview about where are the plus and minuses with regard to the whole entire process of the African IGF. And as Tijani said, he did not talk about the timely arrival of the train, but those delays of the train, which is actually all those things that we need to address that he spoke about. So I'll try then to, while highlighting them, both things that they have mentioned, to propose some sort of solutions in a way forward. Now, with regard to the media, which is actually the first issue, I think my recommendation would be that the Secretariat will have to make an effort to invite the media to cover and participate as appropriate. Could you please note that? And if there is anything, if I say something that you don't agree with, just raise your hand and say no, and then we start discussing. This is number one. I think this is a solution to what has been mentioned as a lack of media contribution participation. Now, who should act on the recommendation? That's a very good question. I believe the recommendation emanating from this forum need to be put in a format with a matrix of responsibilities. Every recommendation need to be given to a specific entity to address that into report on as appropriate on the next time. i.e., if the recommendation, such the first one I said, is addressed to the Secretariat, the Secretariat need to make sure that is part of his responsibility, is responsible to address that. If this is about something related to one of the stakeholders, be it civil society or the government and so on, we should also say that if this is a recommendation is addressed to a specific region, the region has to know that that specific recommendation is addressed to them and so on. Meaning, every time we do a recommendation, we have to have a matrix of responsibility. Is that something we can move on with? Thank you very much. Now, something has been said that between IGFs, between the two meetings, we don't talk. I think my recommendation here will be that we open a mailing list for everybody. We have a platform, a forum, discussion forum, in which we can continually keep on talking about whatever issue we have in between. And I think this is something also we have to need to make it as something very popular. And my recommendation here that the Secretariat will have to create that discussion forum so we can keep on talking. If that's something we can move on with.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Now, on the reporting with regard to the financial expenditure and so on, my recommendation here again will be to the Secretariat. So every time they need to put in the website a report on how much money they have collected and where the money has been used, and be transparent and put in the website so everybody knows about that. Is that something we can move on with, please? Thank you very much. Now, I have mentioned something about the matrix of responsibility. Anything from now on we'll be doing, we need to know who will be responsible or which entity will be responsible for that. Now, with regard to the clarity in communicating specifically about the preparation, I believe that we have started during the preparation of this IGF and other ones all the time to start to communicate among us in order to build very well the agenda. I think we need to improve our communication channels, the Skypes and the Zooms, and we have been using, sometimes they are on and off. And people are participating on and off. That's why you see some people have contributed to the agenda, some not. Again, we need to request the Secretariat to improve that communication channels we need to have among us, and use again the discussion forum in order to build as much as possible a good agenda and a good meeting. However, we need to put a caveat that it should not be lengthy, indefinite discussion process. It has a limited time when to start and when to finish. And then again, those preparation committee, I don't know if they still call themselves preparation committee, should be the one responsible for that and working with the Secretariat to make that happening as soon as possible. Because until few days before the meeting, we could not secure the moderators, the speakers, because we did not get volunteers and we didn't want to nominate once. So that also, the contribution from you is very important. And that, I think, during the discussions, the forums and the discussion we'll have with organizing committee, we need to make sure that everybody is contributing. Now, if at a certain point of time, there will be no contribution from the ground, the Secretariat will have to take the appropriate decision. Do we agree on that? Or Jemaa, please.
Thank you, Moctar. On this point, I think that we had experience, succeeded experience. It was the one of Abuja. We worked with the Skype, and it worked very well because we weren't talking, we were chatting, writing, and we have the memory of our discussion, and we did a very good job. It wasn't indefinite, and it was done in a limited time and very well done. I think that we have now to start to think about a structure like the MAG, not the MAG, but something like it, bureau, anything you wanted. I don't like bureau because it is more administration, but a multi-stakeholder structure that will be in charge of the content, of the substance. And this structure will not be standing one. It is standing structure, but the composition is changing every time, so that everyone can contribute. And I think that with this structure and with the right tools for communication, if the Skype worked last year, if it doesn't work next year, we have to find the right tool of communication so that this structure can do the job good together with the Secretariat. The Secretariat is very important, but this job is a job of the multi-stakeholder group.
Thank you, Tijani. I would just like to ensure, yes, just 1 minute, please. I'd like to ensure you that the Secretariat, as we are a Secretariat, meaning we are supporting you. We are not pushing anything and we are not imposing anything. It's you. However, if at a certain point of time, no decision is making from the floor, the Secretariat will propose something. But again, we don't have a problem with anybody. It's a less job for the Secretariat, by the way, because if you will be in charge of preparing the contents and securing the moderators and the speakers, so that is the best thing we'll have. You, not only you will be happy, but also will be resting. So believe me, we want you to be the actors on doing everything. Okay? So just one comment from, before going to Galouz, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Moctar. I abstained from giving any intervention this morning, but it seems that this is an appropriate time for decisions to be taken, or at least guidelines given. I completely agree with Tijani on the fact that we need an equivalent of MAC, whatever it is called. In fact, there was a time where in 2011, there was an initiative to create a bureau. It's just that this bureau was never established, and I think we need to revisit that. Permit me to make a comment on that. The success of such a bureau depends upon its multi-stakeholder character. In the case of Africa, we need multi-stakeholders and multi-regional approach. We're in a very specific context. We have 5 regions on our continent, and we need to remain multi-stakeholder in our approach. And I'd like to propose, Chairperson, that in the media, we stimulate reflection on the best way of ensuring that we have a multi-stakeholder and a multi-regional approach. We cannot have a MAC with 200 people, but we need to ensure that everyone is represented. If we don't have such representation, it will never work. That's my first comment. So we need a MAC or a bureau or a structure that is responsible for content. So how do we then do this? I don't agree that there was no consultation this year. There was consultation, but it was late. It came too late. Of course, we need a plan to make a plan. We need some kind of time in order to prepare. We cannot start just 2 months in advance, even if we have certain intentions. Once we have finished the first IGF, you then need to ensure that you plan for the next one. And in this way, you'll be able to avoid this problem of rushing. And if we were to start even tomorrow to think about the next IGF, then we'd be able to gain a lot in terms of effective representation, etc. The third comment I wanted to make, but very quickly, is the link between Africa IGF and the global IGF. Today, as it stands, we have the impression that Africa IGF is in suspense, with no real relationship with the global IGF and without any real relationship with the national IGFs. So I'd like to say that one of the roles that should be assigned to this intermediary structure to all intents and purposes is to ensure that the activities of Africa IGF are aligned with the global IGF as well as the national IGFs and the sub-regional IGFs. So this is very detailed work. It's not very simple or easy to achieve that. Why? Because we want to success, and in order to respond to the concerns of the time, and that's not all we need to do. We need to be continuously updating ourselves. Neither in Abuja or in here, the issue of 2015 wasn't addressed in a radical or serious manner. 2015 is a a watershed time. And I think this is important for the IGF. And this year, we've achieved a lot, especially at a global level. And this had an enormous impact upon the perceptions of the future activities of the IGF. Perhaps we haven't sufficiently evaluated this, but sincerely, I was hoping that this IGF, with this intermediary structure, as well with a minimum of vision for 2015, would at least bring us some progress.
Unfortunately, the list where we are. We stopped at the. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just want to react in some of the issues which was raised. And I'm just reading the statutes of the African IGF. The African IGF is a multi-stakeholder process where it's clearly stated that the bureau, you call it a bureau or a MAC, it is the same. The name is not important. Is composed of the conveners of the regional IGF. That is done, definitely. Because conveners of the West Africa, Southern Africa, and East Africa, they are part of the process. They are there. The issue, and we said that, and 3 other stakeholder representatives from each region. That means if the convener is government, we need to have civil society, we need to have private sector, we need to have academia. If the convener is civil society, we need to have government, private sector, and academia. So this is it. It is clearly written in the statutes. It's not implemented. It says the secretariat cannot go and run and tell you, please bring me a stakeholder from your sub-region. Each sub-region is supposed to say, these are my members who are going to participate in the MAC or in the bureau. We only know the conveners. That's all. So each sub-region should arrange to make sure that they have whoever is supposed to be in this. And this is the one who is leading the program and so on. When we started this in the program, we had all the conveners of the sub-regional IGF to be part of the process. There is no other stakeholder group inside. So what do you do? Even in North Africa, where there is not even a regional IGF, we had brought them inside. So I think this is not really a question which should be raised. The other issue is the website. We have an independent website as per the recommendation of Abuja. It is there. We are putting any document we receive, we put it up. There is no document. Even the presentation we did today, you go to the website, you find them there. And we have a discussion list also. It is through the discussion list we have been communicating with all of you. The linkages between the IGF and the regional IGF, the linkages are there. When the MAC decided that we are going to look for teams, in Africa we discussed. I remember properly that one time Baudouin has proposed that this is what you want to put, some other guy has proposed that you want to put in the teams of the global IGF. And this was done, we submitted it. Some of them went through, some of them were accepted. And I participated in the meetings several times. And that's why we had yesterday, the person, Constance, who is in charge of connecting the next billion to be part of this process here with us. She's connecting the next billion. And we brought her because she's in the global IGF to be part of this process. And we have interregional dialogue in all the IGFs. And Africa has always been participating in that interregional dialogue. The last one was last year. Moctar was there. All of us were there. Some of them were there with. Mary was there in the one in Bali. We were in some of those meetings together. We participated. So there is a linkage definitely. And something I want to make it clear is that we are volunteering. You don't have to compare us with the global IGF. They have a secretariat funded only to do that work. As this is additional work on what you are doing. We are not paid for this. please. So we need funds to be able to do this work, to recruit people to do it. We are volunteering. We work on weekend, we work at night. You see emails we send you at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So I think this should be appreciated at least. Thank you.
Yes.
I didn't want to. Mock, I didn't go parler.
To ask Moctar to have a clear recommendation about this issue of preparation of the content of the IGF. Thank you.
Adil, you want to say something?
Yeah, just want to point out, I had notes here. They were very good suggestions that were made and we are taking note of with respect to the media and the discussion forum prior to the event. And the need to report on finance on the website. These are all excellent recommendations we'll take note of. I have one concern though. We see sometimes people making recommendation and they expect that it's going to be talked about in the next meeting. And I think as a secretariat, we need to make sure that these recommendations that are agreed by the majority and they're clearly stated so that we can take action on. But if somebody is making recommendation, they don't have to expect that it's going to be discussed in the next meeting. It has to be agreed by the majority. And just to emphasize on the point that McCann make about the challenges we face in terms of funding and staffing, it's all volunteer work. It's a lot of work. We work overnight and things like that. So we are very limited in terms of the resources. Thank you.
Very much appreciated your work. Let me then, you have interrupted me on my, how can I say, my running. Mary, please. Okay.
Thank you. Who are at the secretariat? We had that problem in our at the national level. All we decided to do is to have a desk. If AUC is our secretariat, who is in charge of that desk, so that is the person you communicate with, is very key. When you are making your recommendation, please let us know. It's not when you send your email, except when McCann came to take up and started responding to our email. We didn't know who is the handle. We need to know the handle. Then, excuse me, if it's question of funding, let AUC put it in its budget, let ECA put it in its budget, that we need a desk, even if it is an intern. Let there be a desk. Let there be a small person that runs the secretariat. Thank you.
We will do that. We will, I was just coming to that. You just, well, if you keep on interrupting me, guys, we will never finish and I will never be able to make any recommendation. Okay, who is the nicest among you? Okay. Rida. Rida, but make it short, please.
Don't worry. Mr. Chairperson, we've forgotten in our discussion, this IGF is a transition IGF. Initially, there is the ECA, and actually I have to thank McCann for all he did for the creation of this IGF. I think it's not there, but one of the recommendations is to thank the ECA and McCann. We name them to thank them for the efforts they have put in. Now we're in transition, and we're taking it as a good occasion to do better. This is not a criticism of the past, but we want to do better. And to do better in the future, it is the issue of tools. All the remarks that we have given between the community of IGF and the Secretariat, there is nothing. And this is the moment to create something. Mr. Chairperson, will assistance of the ECA and McAfee, we have to create the structures, the intermediate structures we are listening for the other IGF. Why don't we have it in Africa?
OK, merci, Président. Bon,
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I think the idea of Tijani is not a bad one. Maybe we called it another name that was organized committee. If we want us to formalize it, we can formalize it here. But it was called an organized committee. We had all the sub-regional IGF and the bureau. Now for issues of resource, this is an issue that we cannot discuss here. So we'll leave the AUC and ACA to discuss about the resources needed for the secretariat. So we should talk about organization and see how we can look at the format and the content, internal organizational links with the international IGF. But for the issues of fund, we shall find another solution. Thank you. Thank you. I think I will not be interrupted again. Is now for history. Before being a chairperson of in 2011 in Nairobi, there we decided to create the secretariat after a long discussion, which we had, me and him, and this is the idea that comes up again, the idea of creating the IGF Africa. But I agree with you that without him, we wouldn't have had anything. So we have to know, I've already said it, and I'm repeating it again, in his presence, and even to his bosses, without him, things would have gone forward and things are moving on. It is a good transition, and this is a point which I wanted to insist on further. I was talking about the host country. I agree that we should have a call for application, and then we did it for a number of months in transparency, and on the set we did not find anyone, no country accepted to host the Africa IGF. There was secretary had to take a decision. We took a decision, last-minute decision, because we are supposed to find means of holding this IGF with an optimal means. We had to organize the 3 events together. That is AFSIC, SSA, and altogether, despite the difficulties, but it allows us to use the resources optimally. We really agree for the principle that have regional rotation, and even within a region have national rotation at country level. We have said that we should have we call for application for hosting, so that the countries can host the IGF. We have prepared terms of reference, and now we are discussing with the countries individually to explain them, so that convince them to hold, to host the government. And then we will also, it could be the African Union or ECA.
Last year we had put preferably a francophone or a Lusophone country. This year I don't think it is good to put it, because this has distracted other countries who were ready to take it over, who did not, because they say these people are looking for francophone or Lusophone country. Because I know that Egypt was ready to take it, but we were waiting for a francophone and a Lusophone up to the last minute. So we'll make it the bid open. Any country which is ready to take it, we will take it. And we look at the best offer. Even if a country has taken it this year, they want to take it next year, there's no country to take it, we'll take it to that country. Yes, if you are ready, we'll take it. But I won't tell you, so Egypt has offered to host it anyway. So, but we will make a cahier de charge. We are going to put a bid. If Egypt offers, another country offers, we'll analyze the both offers and see which is the best. Yeah.
With regard to the funding, I completely agree with the Moctar proposal, which is actually both institutions will not only look at the funds within their own respective organizations, but also looking for outside funders and partners actually to do this kind of thing. So we move on with regard. I spoke about the reporting. All recommendations should be put in the website with the matrix of responsibility. However, escalating those recommendations, the only way you will have to escalate them is to the African Union process. Now, the African Union process is normally goes through a process of the STC and or the bureau of that STC, and therefore it is very appropriate if the role of the AUC is actually highlighted as a secretariat. And this is the thing that has been discussed among the two parties. Mind you that the secretariat is hosted in the AUC, supported fully by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. The contacts points are two so far until we decide otherwise. At this point of time, we'll keep Adil and Makan as a point communications channels until we sit down and discuss otherwise, see what are the persons or the people to be appointed to do this kind of job, and will be communicated to you appropriately. Are we moving on that? So we hope that will be stable enough to be stable enough this way, and we will continue. And if anything happen, we are dynamic. If anything happen, if at one point of time the AUC is not up to the task, right, we will change our arms. It's all about goodwill to do things the best way, and we are looking for the best way, be it at the AUC, at NPCA, or at UNECA, is the best way. Who is the best will be serving the situation, will be the one who will be taken care of. Right, this is our principle. I am not insisting on having it. UNECA is not insisting on having. We are having the best way to do things. All right. This is what I had from the presentations and discussion. However, as part of the secretariat, I had few items that I wanted actually to propose with regard to the way forward. Number one, it is very, very important to highlight the fact that the conveners, as we said, we wanted the regional economic communities to be very active part with regard to convening the regional IGF. Yes, they should act either as a secretariat or as the support, but the RECs are very important. I know that they are very limited because most of the time it's one person. But the blessing of the RECs make it very easy for the secretariat itself in term, since as per the African Union structure, the RECs are the building blocks of everything we do, and therefore it is very important to involve them. In addition, we have a 6-month coordination meeting with the RECs among us, the ICT people, and therefore it is very important to put that item of IGF as part of our discussion we do among other issues we are discussing. It is very important that we start again to optimize the resource we do have. Our proposal is to have all the time the AFSIG back to back with the African IGF. It makes sense in the sense that those young people we are preparing for the future not only get trained theoretically, but in the same time plunge into the real African IGF, see the stakeholders, understand the issue, and so they can take the relay. We need to make sure that our sponsors are really highlighted, their roles are highlighted in terms, so we can thank them, and so they can know exactly what they have done, where their money has gone, and therefore next time they will be able to contribute. My last item is we need a proposal for the date, probably in the venue, the date on the venue of the meeting, but I believe that at this point of time we cannot decide. But if you have any ideas, feel free to communicate openly or through the secretariat so we can know exactly what we have to do. This is what I have. If the secretariat have, the member of the secretariat has anything, please let me know.
want to point in what Gelus has said about the 2015. This is taken into account in the African Union Declaration on IG. It is clearly written there, the support we have, Africa has put in, and this was circulated to all stakeholders, finalized. You remember it was on the website, and for 2 months, coordinated by Towela, taken to the ministers. Unfortunately, it didn't go through the channel of the ministers, but it went through other stakeholders. So the ministers wanted to see it, so they are being discussing it, but the full recommendations are there on the support for the continuation of IGF.
Okay.
Okay, excuse me.
Totally right. However, what I was talking about was a decision or a recommendation coming out from this IGF, because here it is multi-stakeholder. The decision of the ministers is a decision of the ministers. A recommendation from the IGF is a multi-stakeholder recommendation. That's the difference. But as a matter of fact, there has been a decision of the ministers about that.
Thank you. Now, last one before I just, Mary, I have to override you now. Please, Jere, go.
Thank you, Moctar.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to make a recommendation, more especially on the report that was given by Towela. She highlighted on what is happening on the regional IGFs. I have had the opportunity to work with all the regional IGFs. None of them is the same. So you cannot give them a matrix of these ones do not have a coordinator, these ones do not have a secretariat. We all know that in this IGF, most of it is voluntary work. So it is very difficult to be able to fund a secretariat in East Africa IGF and say, this is the secretariat. It would be much better if she would speak to the particular persons to get the actual view from all the regional IGFs instead of putting them all in one matrix. Thank you.
I just wanted to support what you said, having back-to-back. I also want to ask whether you move the meeting of the Bureau of ICT ministers. Does it go from country to country? Okay, if it does, so any country that is hosting it would also know that back-to-back with it, we may be holding. So I want to support that in the premise that it's movable, because we are all here, maybe because you held it here. All right, thank you.
So thank you, Judy, for your comments. I feel compelled to respond. And I think what you must understand is that this was research that was undertaken from an academic perspective using whatever documentation was publicly available. So it's not an issue of trying to categorize all the regional IGFs into a one-size-fits-all. In fact, the very purpose of the study was to highlight the fact that there are structural differences in the regional IGFs and that these structural differences translate into different ways of working and different ways in which the regional IGFs have impact. So it's not meant to victimize or penalize or blacklist any of the regional IGFs. It was more of an academic study to understand what is happening in the regional IGFs, how they are structured, and how this affects the way they work.
Thank you very much. I think we have had a series of recommendations, very practical. I am asking the Secretariat to take note of those recommendations with the matrix of responsibilities. Yes, I forgot about remote participation. So sorry about that. Please. Go ahead.
Thank you. There is a remote participant, Nena Nwakanma, who says she opened the African IGF handle on Twitter, and she'll be happy to hand it over to the Secretariat when ready. So.
Thank you very much. Say thank you to her and hi. All right. Okay, thank you very much. The Secretariat will take note of all we have said. Most important thing, the matrix. Recommendation, who does what? That's very important. And thank you again for your all kind contribution. I think we're finished.
I think we can go to tea break. 2 break.